future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Greetings and salutations, everyone, and thank you so much for listening, watching, sharing, participating, commenting. We are Dr. Judy WTF, and I'm your host, Walt Lusk, and we have, of course, Dr. Judy Rosenberg here in the house. The WTF is What the Freud, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of WTF. We're going to be doing a show, probably two, on abandonment, and we're not abandoning you by any way, shape, or form. We hope you don't abandon us. And this is a call-in show. We're going to be having a caller, a special caller. But if you want to get on the couch with Dr. Judy, you can. It's area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. Or if you're international, you can Skype us at UBN, which is Universal Broadcasting Network, UBN Radio 2 on Skype. And we'll put you on the couch with Dr. Judy with your emotional ouch. We're going to be doing a special call-in the first Thursday of every month. We're going to have free-for-all calls. Whatever topic you want to talk about is what Dr. Judy will talk about as well. And that's the first Thursday of every month. We broadcast every Thursday at 8 o'clock Pacific here in Los Angeles and on UBN Radio. So there you go. And you can find us, of course, on Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and, of course, YouTube. So how you feeling, Doctor?
I'm okay. I'm going to try not to cough during the episode. That would be a feat.
Well, you did it last week. It was fabulous.
Yeah. Right, I did it. We have so many questions that are asked of us through the YouTube commentaries that is why we are opening up the floor to you, so you can call in. And I've also asked my beloved interns and psych assistants to please answer questions because I don't have a lot of time to answer questions. Walt, you've been doing a fabulous job.
Well,
thank you.
Your popularity is forever increasing, Dr. Judy. I mean, you only have patients on 4 continents. You got to get some sleep somehow.
Well, I have an amazing staff, and I want
Yes,
everyone to know that we have a very international staff because we are the Psychological Healing Center, and there are a lot of cultures that pass through our doors. So we have people who speak Farsi. We have people who speak Russian. We have a staff member who speaks Vietnamese, English, a little Spanish. I speak Hungarian, so if anybody is out there that speaks Hungarian, my Hungarian is about at a 3rd grade level, but I think I could still do it. So today we are going to be speaking on the topic of abandonment. It is a very, very wide topic. And I know that, Walt, you've done a lot of research on it, and certainly we have touched on this topic because a large part of what we talk about is narcissistic injuries, okay? And people who incur narcissistic injuries lack empathy. That is one of the hallmarks of being very narcissistically injured. And so when someone lacks empathy, they tend to emotionally abandon people because they don't feel the other, they have no ability to feel for the other person. And so it creates a very poor systems gone wrong. And for many of you who've been watching, you know that I think in systems terms, and I created a mind map called the Be the Cause Mind Map for Healing Human Disconnect. And I want to go through this so that you understand what the Freud I'm talking about when I am talking about these systems gone wrong. So if you will, put the mind map up there, please.
There it is. It's obviously a 9-panel system. And I wanted to touch on real quick. We talk about really a basis of attachment theory. And in my view, the exact opposite of attachment theory is abandonment. So it's kind of long in coming, even though I've had a couple of requests for this. We are where we are.
So the essence of the mind map is to identify childhood wounds, which is panel 1. identify how people react to these childhood wounds. And now we're talking about amygdala reactions, very primitive reactions to being abused physically, emotionally, sexually, smothered, and neglected. These are the 5 big wounds of childhood. And then if you look at panel 3, that tells us how we encoded all this information. So as a result of our past, which is the top third panels, we encode. We encode messages from our parents along the lines of we're not good enough, or we're not lovable, or something like that. And then we get tripped up by life, by other people. We get triggered, and we go on a very bad ride called the WTF, which is panels 4, 5, 6. Chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And so as a result of childhood wounds, we're set up to be much more prone to be activated. And then we erect a bunch of defenses, which oftentimes lock us in psychological prison. And I think we have a call-in.
We do.
We do.
Hi, you're on the couch with Dr. Judy. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Dr. Judy and Walt.
Hello.
Hi.
Sheila.
Nice to hear your
calling
voice.
Back.
So great to hear you.
Thanks for calling back again.
Well, thank you. And I am so excited to call in tonight and on the topic that you guys have for 2 reasons. One, for myself, because it's my number 2, and now that I just heard you talk again, my number 1 wound. But I first wanted to talk to some of the callers or listeners, that might be out there tonight listening to the show, and to just tell them a tiny bit about my story with you. I am a client of Dr. Judy's Psychological Healing Center, and I have a mind map therapist. And I'm about 4 weeks into the program right now, and I just want to back up for a second right there and let people know out there that I have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I've had it probably my whole life. I've been in traditional therapy off and on for, I'm going to say, since I was 15, and I'm 53, so 40-some years. I've been trying to seek help, not really knowing what was wrong, getting a ton of misdiagnoses going through life. I have what I know now to be PTSD, anxiety, sleep disorders. We're now finding out that borderline personality is a kind of a mood disorder where emotions come into my brain and they don't process right. And then there's a whole bunch of things that go along with it regarding, other symptoms that I might have been experiencing over the years with relationships, chaos, just the ripple effect. Right. And the bottom line is, until I found your program, Dr. Judy and Walt, nobody was helping me. And traditional therapy, I would go in and sit and try and dig up and research on my own and what's wrong with me, because I knew something was wrong. But if you don't know what's wrong, you can't fix it.
Correct.
Right, exactly.
And so, anyway, after years of being in what I call an emotional prison, and a lot of the years, it was whatever I was going through was so buried deep down that we couldn't even get to it. And then in traditional therapy, you go in and they bring up all the pain, and then you either run out of insurance or you get tired of going because it's just so painful every time you go, and there's no result. There's no hope. There's nowhere to put the pain in traditional therapy. And I have had over 10 suicide attempts. I don't know what most of my life wanted to make me end my life. I know now it was my negative core beliefs. I know from your program just exactly why and how the suicide feelings come up. And so I think we'll be talking about that in a minute in abandonment. But I just want to go on to tell the listeners that this program, I'm sitting in this chair today and I'm alive because of this program. And it just got to a point where the emotional pain was so terrifying. On the other hand, borderlines can be successful, and you can have patents, and you can run companies. You can do all these amazing things, but inside we're sabotaging ourselves unknowingly, like subconscious versus conscious. And so, even though I'm all these wonderful things, I go in restaurants, I cater, I can do 1,000,001 things, and I have 1,000,001 talents. Once I get myself into a position of, I don't know what you want to call order, then I would just unconsciously sabotage it. And so when I found the Mind Map program and started reading the book, I got everything in theory, and then I thought I was healed. Remember the last time I called in 6 months ago? You said, "What panel are you in?" And I said, "Well, I'm in panel 7."
Yeah.
But
Right. Shifting
you
away.
really,
Right.
I really only after getting a mind map therapist, and that's the other thing I want to tell the listeners. If you've been suffering with the loathing and the self-hate and the suicide, and I got to tell you how many times I got diagnosed with depression. If one more person told me I was depressed, I was going to lose my mind.
Okay.
I
So
wasn't depressed, and I knew it.
So I want to get into, and thank you so much, by the way, for sharing
Absolutely.
this.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate you, and I know that you've been really verbal about your experience at the Psychological Healing Center, and we appreciate that. And my wonderful.
Once in my life, I have hope and a place to put the pain through your program. That's the last thing I want to say on that.
Okay, thank you. So I want to deconstruct this a little bit so other people can hear what's going on, because the hallmark of BPD is a deep-seated sense of abandonment. Not
Correct.
only a feeling of being abandoned by others, but what that teaches us is that if we're not worthy, if we're not worthy of love, if we don't exist in the core of us, then we abandon ourselves. And a lot of the
Correct.
work that I know that you've shared is to do with the reintegrating yourself with yourself and to compassionately love your inner child, to borrow a term from back in the 60s and 70s, to really introduce the compassionate Sheila to the little girl who has been hurting and in shame and in judgment of herself. And I know it's a process for you, and I know you've been very, very patient. And I think you're probably one of the most hardworking people on this subject that I have ever, seriously, that I have ever known. And so to deconstruct it a little bit, if we could hear a little bit about what your panel 1 wounds are so people can understand why this deep feeling of abandonment. So if you would be willing to share a little bit about that, I would appreciate it. Yeah.
And just to let you and them know, you were just talking before I called in about the my mother was the narcissist. Father was I don't know what you want to call him. He was just very passive, and he just escaped the home because he was just trying to deal with her too.
Okay.
So I had my mother was, I had no emotional support at all towards either of there's 3 of us, 3 siblings, had no emotional support from her. She was very unstable, and she did a lot of target comparison.
And did she exhibit that lack of empathy, that inability to really connect with you?
Totally, yeah.
Totally.
It was,
okay. And I'm sure she scared your father away, right?
yes, very
Okay.
controlling, and like she would do things like, "Alan, you get down to that bedroom and you beat those girls," and he'd just be walking in the door and he wouldn't even know why, or, and it was just, you do what she said at that moment, or the consequences of it were just, just horrifying. So my dad sometimes would come down and beat the bed, and we'd have to scream out. And
Oh, God. To comply with your mother's wishes to beat you? Something like that?
Yes.
Right. What an
Sometimes
interesting...
he just would be frustrated with her, and he would just beat us,
Okay. Okay, so when a mother is not connected to her daughter...
not nurturing or anything else.
Right. I mean, our first relationship is with our primary caregiver, and that's supposed to be mom. And if mom doesn't give us the eye contact, the skin contact, the breastfeeding, the nurturing, the mirroring, the attunement...
We were absolutely Barbie dolls. Sit here, look like this, don't cry, don't smile, don't move.
Yeah, so what happens is that the outer core is relied upon, but the inner core, there's a hollowness to it. And that's what I call the hole in the soul. It's really, really dark in there. And so this is the double dungeon effect I talk about in therapy and in the book that I wrote called Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. Because what happens is you turn to mom. She's not emotionally available or even maybe physically available. And you turn to dad, who represents your outer world, and he's not there either. And then you turn within, and there's nothing inside, because how do we develop an inner core is through mirroring and attunement. And it's that process, it's that relationship with the mother that builds the solid sense of self. So again, in order to have healthy independence, you have to have a healthy sense of dependence. And so would we both agree that you did not have that?
Exactly. And I went a step further because she wouldn't let anyone else love me either. So my dad wasn't allowed to love me. She wouldn't love me.
Okay.
She pitted the siblings, principals. There's just no love for little Sheila at all.
So that's another issue. When mother is so narcissistic, she wants to be the sun, the moon, and the stars. And so if any of the siblings dare to take her off the pedestal, then she'll divide and conquer, a very common way of keeping herself as number one. So she pits every sibling against the other, and so therefore she remains in position. So that was part of your experience as well?
Yes, oh yes, definitely.
Okay, so
Yep, my brother had to call me and tell me I was a pig and fat, and she'd be
Mm-hmm.
laughing in the background, and it's really bad stuff.
There's really, really, really bad stuff. So
I didn't get to know my brother till he was 22. And then he finally said, "You're not any of those things your mom said. You're quite a nice person with a loving heart." And so we got about 1 year of a relationship together before borderline. He had the same thing, and he was murdered because of his lifestyle from running from the pain. And so living a life of borderline. And then he ended up getting murdered. And so I never got to really get to know him. So that hurts too.
Wow. Yeah. There's so much there. There's so much unprocessed grief, and I'm really sorry. I know that
That's
even
okay.
talking about it
I
is
have this
really
program
painful.
now, and this is the key to get out. So I'm just interested in just sticking to it and finding a way to heal my hole in my soul, bring light into that hole. And there's so many good things in your book, Judy.
Thank you so much. And you know, seriously, I'll say it again because I want to overemphasize it. You are the hardest working person I've ever met on your issues. You leave no stone unturned. You keep going over and over, like every single word, every single therapy session. I know you take notes and you really take it in. Okay, so what, if you don't mind sharing, what was the core belief that you were left with at the end of the day?
Okay, so my number one wound was, of course, my mother with no emotional support.
Yeah.
The unstable, and then that. And so that one is my feelings. My reaction to that was just that I'm different than everybody else. I'm unlovable. Something's wrong. So therefore, my encoding and my negative core belief was that I'm not good enough.
Not good
my inner
enough.
child.
Okay,
Yeah.
and a lot of what's happening in the therapeutic sessions is that we're busting lies. We use the truth light to shine the truth light on systems that are dysfunctional and unsustainable. And my way of seeing things is that when something is foundationally built on a lie, it will topple over. It'll go into panel 4, 5, 6, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. So part of your work right now is busting this lie, is it not? Because are you really that core belief? Is that really you?
Well, but see, borderline, so like my adult person can challenge that lie and say, no, that's not me, and I can start building. But then on the other hand, my 7-year-old and my inner child does feel that way, and she will sabotage me all day long.
Right.
And just,
So I call that the psychovirus, because, see, here's the thing, is that we look at our parents as source. They're the source. And so whatever they say is what we believe, because who else do we have to believe? So if mommy says you're stupid, you're stupid. If mommy says you're unlovable, you're unlovable. That's the way it is. As Alice Miller says in her book, Prisoners of Childhood, Drama of a Gifted Child, the child would rather be a bad child in a good world because she doesn't want to blame the parents. She doesn't want to see her parents as bad or wrong. So here you are as a little girl.
If I could stop you for just 1 second.
Yeah.
That is exactly right what you said, because number 2 wound is the absence of the second caregiver, which is my father.
Yeah.
And I can't even think about him. It's hard for me to even put one bad thing on him, because he was the only little tiny piece when I could get him that made me feel like I had an ounce of love.
Okay, and don't forget that when we do the mind map work, I have a saying that the more you defend the parents, the harder it is to heal. And we have to let
Right.
down the defenses in order to work through these feelings. And we both know, we recognize the fact that parents don't get up in the morning and say, you know, I really want to screw over my children. This is multi-generational, and unhealed parents, hurt parents, don't necessarily make good parents, as you well know. Okay, so just remember in the course of your therapy, we're not trying to demean, devalue, and destroy your mother or your father. What we're doing here is we're allowing you to have full expression of the pain around it. And there are two kinds of acts of really hurting a child. One is acts of omission and acts of commission. So what do you think your father was doing? Was he omitting or was he committing? Or maybe both.
So I'm a little bit confused on what that means. But
okay, so
as far as running from my mom or running from his kids, or
I mean by that one parent usually does the devaluing or the hitting, and then the other parent does usually nothing about it. Okay?
yeah,
Or
that's he did nothing about it.
That's what I mean by omission. So if
Okay.
you see, I'll make it more dramatic. Let's say you're witness to murder. Remember the case of Kitty Genovese back in 60s. She was murdered in broad daylight in New York, and everybody stood there and watched her get murdered. Why? Because everyone thought someone else called the police, but no one called the police. So she was murdered in broad daylight. So the point is that was an act of omission on the part of thousands of onlookers. There was one committer and one omitter, and thousands of omitters. So in your case, your mother was doing the commission, the demeaning, the calling you fat pig, whatever she was saying, and then your father stood by because he was weaker and more passive, and he didn't want to deal with her, and he probably left a lot because he couldn't stand it. And that's what I mean by omission. And sometimes we forget to be angry at the omitter because they look like sweet, innocent bystanders. Do you understand what I'm saying? So part of your work will be tapping into the hurt of not being stood up for. Okay? Does that make sense?
Okay. And so in sticking with abandonment, these are all the little inner child. We were all, and myself was abandoned emotionally,
right,
mentally, physically.
Okay, so so inside there's this hollow core. There's no real sense of self because, again, mommy didn't put it there. Daddy didn't support it. And so what happens when you get involved in relationships is there's a feeling, and here's the borderline conglomeration, the emotional setup is that the borderline wants to take somebody in, correct? Because they want to fill their hole in the soul. But at the same time, they're feeling what about human beings?
Upset and angry, or like we can't trust them, and we don't even like ourselves enough.
Right. So there was a quote that I read a while ago: borderlines love to hate and hate to love because they're scared to love, and all they know is hate. Okay, so the idea of merging is a very painful thing because there's this thing called the hole in the soul, and there's a desire for love, there's a desire for intimacy, but intimacy never went right to begin with between mother and infant. That's where the blueprint went down, and so that intimacy was pretty much broken at the causal level, and so now you try to pair up with people and you have a bunch of unmet needs. So what do you think people are going to see you as?
Right, and taking it out a step further and seeing how you feel about this too. I did all that, but you said, but also what I did is every single one of I had 2 husbands and like 3 major boyfriends. They were all my mother with us. You know what? They were just the male version of my mother.
Exactly. And that's the Freud, because it's not like you want to go into these patterns, but you're driven to because our psyche is driven to close the file and heal through it. And the only way we know how to heal through it is to pick the wounder, get rewounded, go through the cycle, but it doesn't heal because the wounder's not a healer, okay? And they don't know what the Freud they're doing, and so everything gets reinfected and goes into panel 456, 456, 456, the repetition principle. Okay, so here's the problem, is that there's a deep need for love and connection, as you well know. But love and connection isn't really a very optimistic place to be according to the blueprint. So you might take people in, and because you have so many unmet needs, do you think that a single person can fulfill all of these unmet needs?
No, and then the abandonment. So, like, if any one of them were to look at another woman, I would feel abandoned. They would just do the tiniest thing, even though they were still abusers, because they all were. But I didn't know it when I was in it. I only now can look back and say, that's abusive, that was abusive, that was abusive, that's my mom.
Right.
You know, so.
Right. So you pick them to replicate the original, and at the same time, your neediness, right? The hole in the soul is so needy and so big that you trigger off their issues, and you take them on a ride. You see how this is a self-infecting, and dynamically it creates a horrible system where everybody's lose-lose, right?
Yeah. Because my heart is so big and loving, and I was so loving, but I think, you know, until I can learn to love myself and change my blueprint, I just can't even be. I just got, you know, one was a drug addict, one was an alcoholic. It was just like, I finally, you know, when you start to see the cycle that you're in through your program, you can finally start to make the changes. Because my family had to watch for 21 years with my former husband, me being abused, sexually abused, just the whole thing.
See, the
they
boundaries.
couldn't understand I couldn't leave.
Yeah.
I could not leave.
Well,
the abandonment was
and that's what keeps you locked into these horrific systems, is this deep fear of abandonment. And so if you take the horrible concoction of unmet psychological needs, right, and then the fear of abandonment, and you meet an individual and they let you down, and it's really easy to let a person down who has umpteen unmet needs. All you have to do is not meet their needs a little bit, and then they'll fire off. That amygdala, you know, that primitive brain will fire off, and that core belief will get triggered, and then the reactions to these wounds and the acting out around it is so messy and chaotic that everybody just goes, borderline, and they all want to run, right? And so you pretty much reenact then the
Actually,
the
I got the
story.
ones that were very narcissistic. I'm sure it could go either way for anybody, but I got the ones that wouldn't let me go. I wanted to get out, but they wouldn't even let me out, like how my mom was. They were so controlling. But what's interesting, and I know why now, is I had many people through church and men that were, you know, men, just good men. But that was so uncomfortable for me to be around, that I couldn't take those kind of relationships.
Right.
That was the blueprint.
And I want to address that, because what happens is we are driven to repeat and close the file. So somebody who's not the wounder doesn't even make it on your Richter scale of sexual emotional attraction. They're just not the it person. They're too nice. You don't have the capacity to hold that nice, because it doesn't really play out that piece that needs to be played out. And so that's why it's so important to play it out in the therapeutic confines, so that you don't have to play it out in relationships and get re-injured like this. Okay, so let's go on. So the chaos. So what about the chaos in your life? I think you've talked about some of it already. Broken relationships.
Yeah, well, in my anyone that needs to get a mind map therapist. My therapist is Tracy, and I just can't even talk enough about her. She's amazing.
Thank you.
And so we are just going to be this week getting into panel 4, because I had so much trauma. It's taken just a little bit longer to go to panel 4.
And
but I do know the ripple effect. Are you talking about the ripple effect? So here's my negative core belief. I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I was unwanted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm powerless, not
Yeah.
feeling safe and imperfect.
Yeah.
So the ripple effect from all of that is just choosing the wrong men,
Yeah.
having trouble in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
raising my own children. I was able to break cycles. I would just tell them I don't know what's wrong with me, but I could give them love, but they still had to watch me be emotionally unstable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we started breaking the cycle, but if the therapies could have just done a program like what you're doing, I could have been healed years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's kind of sad for me.
Well,
It's
so not too late, and so now that you know, okay, so very soon you'll be able to be the cause for the most part, because we're human and
right.
we're sometimes at the effect of, and then we have to self-reflect, self-correct, go through that whole process. But the aim of this therapy is to turn it around so that we can expose the lies and take down the old system, and so that you can get out of the psychological prison and be the cause in the of a better outcome in your life. Are we limited on time?
Correct.
You'll be the cause of
Oh,
part two of your
Thank
life.
you, thank you. Okay, of part two of our lives, because part one is not our fault. We can't control how our parents treated us, and certainly we can't control the fact that we have to repress a lot of our feelings because it's too dangerous to say the truth. How do you tell a narcissistic mother the truth of how she's treating you? You can't, because then she may abandon you and say, "Get the hell out of here. You don't talk to me like that." So that's the
More than abandonment, we'll get banished.
It's
We get
the
banished. I got
banished.
banished
Banished.
It's
Wow.
twice for 2 years and once for 4 years.
Yeah, it's the epitome of childhood is a hostage situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So this hostage situation went on with your mother, and then it perpetuated itself in relationships where you paired up with narcissists who probably held you as an objectified, lovely object. Okay. So again, you got to exercise how worthless you are, except in your function as an object, as a woman. And so you were never loved at the core of your being. Why? Because there was this hollowness in the core of your being. And why? Because your mother didn't connect with you. There was a disconnect. Okay, so now you're healing this disconnect by being able to identify your wounds, your amygdala reactions. I want to get into that a little bit, because part of what happens with BPD is there's a fuse going on. Have you noticed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's this, I call it a short emotional bandwidth, because it's the mirroring and the attunement that build these neurotransmitters, these connectivity neurons and their ability to function properly. And so when we don't have that connectivity, then we have horrible reactions. We get anxious much more easily. We get depressed. We feel more vulnerable. We're more prone to panic attacks. On and on and on. Our boundaries go down.
And if I could just say for the listeners, so someone can identify, because I didn't know for years what was going on. So what happens is an emotion comes in, and because of my emotional child abuse and things like that, then my brain didn't grow right. It didn't form right. And they actually have on, studies now in 2008, they can look at a brain BPD and a regular brain and see that our brains aren't like other people's brains that haven't had this kind of trauma. So an emotion comes in, and either my inner child subconscious or my adult will take it in, but it doesn't process in the brain right.
Right.
So I can be triggered. I can be more mad or more sad.
Yes. Yes, I call the brain, the cognitive part of the brain, the emotional cooling system. Okay, so it's almost like there's no coolant there. It just goes right to that primitive, and boom, boom, boom. It bypasses the thought process. And see, when we're not connected to emotionally, it does interfere with our cognition, because until we're safe and until we have that strong inner core, it's really, really hard for us to function in the outer world because we're too busy, as I say, licking our emotional wounds. And as long as we have to
Right.
put that much attention in it's like if you stand up and you don't have balance, then how are you supposed to run? How are you supposed to get
Yeah.
somewhere? So this
Well,
is
let
what's
me tell
right.
the listeners what is going on right now as far as already having a tool, the light tool that you talk about in your book. And I just know this wholeness soul now because I've read it and we've talked about it in therapy. And so the deep darkness, all that stuff, the abandonment, everything in childhood, it looked like my hole in my soul is in the middle of my stomach, and that's where I get all my pain when I get upset. So now I just visualize myself flipping on a light switch
So
whenever it feels
beautiful.
dark in there. I
So
flip on the light
beautiful.
switch, and then it fills up with light in there. And you know how if you suck on a lemon and you start to salivatate, that's how powerful our brains are. So whenever I'm not processing an emotion right, it can trigger my body to feel sick and sad and just really physical symptoms with all this when we're going into the wounds.
It's so
And with
painful. I'd like you to maybe, if you will, because we have people who suffer from this in our practice, and some of these symptoms are so bad they drive people into suicidal ideation, as you know.
Yeah.
And so what then happens is these unmet needs get so profound that they start biting the hand that feeds them. Okay? Because they get angry at the therapist or angry at their husband or angry at everyone because they're not attuning to them properly or they're not giving them all their unmet needs. And how do you cope with these amazingly deep and profound unmet
Judy,
needs? Right.
Before the program, I mean, there would be like nights I would just be like, to the pain. And especially because I'm going into the woods, so it's like I have had amnesia all these years with my inner child.
Sure.
Tracy says, and so
That's the
all of a sudden
trauma.
I'm waking up.
Right.
Yeah, waking up to the trauma, and so I never know when something's going to hit me. Like for the last couple of days, I've been not upset, but having a lot of physical reaction because of our therapy, and so I've had to literally stay in my room.
Yeah.
I'm in an environment right now where I don't have to work or anything, so I literally can't go around. I just attack them. And so, and I know I'm in the pain, so I'm using my spirituality with Jesus. I'm using my truth light. I'll have to pick up your book 6 times a day and read a paragraph. Sometimes I turn you on YouTube, and I just, anything to sometimes distraction. And then sometimes I'll just get out my pills because that's going to be the last second I can take it. And then I have to reach out for my daughter or, somebody. But it's
And your
very
dogs,
physical.
animals?
Yeah, I had a dog that I just loved die once,
Okay.
and I can't attach to another pet since then. That was like 5
see.
years ago, and
I see.
I just can't take that loss again. So no
Okay.
pets right now.
No pets.
But that would be good. I'm kind of thinking about it.
Okay, so
Hello.
you have a lot of ways of reaching
Well, here's
out.
the interesting thing. Before I got into the program, all of this was happening, and I had no idea what was going on. And I would get in the mood, the pains, all the things. But somehow I had I think it's panel 5, your negative defense system, right?
Yeah,
Jumping
defense
ahead
mechanisms, right?
I never went to, I could have been an alcoholic. My brother, he totally went to the drugs to deal with the pain. And that's why a lot of people who are drinking and doing drugs were just hiding, whether you have borderline or any other mental disorder or dis-ease, as you call it. We're just trying to get that pain to go away.
Right.
Whereas if people could recognize this as a disconnect with self, and we need to reconnect with ourselves, and we cannot do that until we dismantle the wound, understand the reaction to it,
Yep.
figure out what the coding was,
Yep. You
how
got
the
it.
chaos, the journey that, you have that thing on your website, and I went to that one day after I thought I had all this down in your book and I was going to be healed. And then I went on the journey, and then I had to take 10 steps back because until you dismantle those wounds, you can't stop the pain.
And you have to bring up the file because the file is going to come up because it wants to be completed. Just like Sigmund Freud said back in the day, we want to finish the psychological business, and that's what you're doing. You're not bringing it up just to bring it up and wallow in it and,
No.
let's bring on
No.
some pain and suffering. It's to be reprocessed. And that's why I'm
Right.
really, really grateful that you're working with Tracy, because I know she's really kind and patient, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
seems like you have a connection with her. And so through
Mhm.
that connection, human to human connection, what's the opposite of disconnect? Is connect. And when you have somebody who cares about you and somebody who attunes to you and someone who listens to you, it makes a huge difference in your healing process. There was something else that I wanted to say about I believe it was to that point where people bite the hand that feeds them. So what can you say to these people? Because people do want to get well, but then when they get to that frustration point, they start chewing up their own
Well, first
therapist.
of all, they don't recognize most because we aren't taught. Your program is a teaching program, so so we're not taught. So back in the day, let's say I might get triggered. Then a child, something happened, I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And so I would get triggered, and then I would slam the door. I feel borderlines, because I've been so traumatized, we feel more than most people.
Yes.
We're sadder than
Yes.
most of
Yes.
the brain.
Okay.
And then we're more angry than most people. So here's an example. I used to road rage. I could not drive without road raging, and if somebody cut me off, boy, I had to honk my horn, I had to catch up to them, I had to give them a look, And then when I started to get into your program, I realized, okay, so what I was doing is I was taking it personal, like that car was trying to cut me off.
Because
No,
you're
Sheila, that car
worthless.
was
Because you're worthless. Remember, it goes back to
Right.
the core belief. Because you believe that you're worthless, and they're trying to cut you off because you're meaningless to them. Do you see the crack lens
And
of
now I
perception?
drive,
Right.
yeah, I
Right.
drive like a beautiful charm now. There's no stress. I realize when they cut me off, I go, oh, they're not trying to hurt me. They don't know me.
Oh, okay.
And then,
They don't
Yeah.
know you. Exactly. So, I'm also talking to people here who either suffer from BPD or they're married to somebody with BPD. Just understand that the rage is a projection. It's not personal.
Yes.
Okay? And so you have to be very patient that there's this desire to kill off relationships, but then there's a desire to reconnect with relationships. Through psychoeducation, I believe that you can psychoeducate people with this dis-ease to be more, how shall I say, to be more oriented toward helping them help those who help them. Does that make sense?
Right.
Because
Yeah, so let me just
ultimately
put
they
that
must help the person that's helping them, and not kill off the therapy or kill off the relationship or kill off any kind of help. It's very important.
Right. And the problem is that we can't express ourselves very well. So we might have a good intention, but it comes out wrong.
Exactly.
We might not. It might come out not even like we meant it to come out. But since I understand what's going on now, here's an example. Had all the nephews, nieces, everybody over. I was so excited to see them, connect, cook with them. And the minute they all got here, I was angry and mean, and it was miserable. I didn't even know. So I stopped myself. Okay, what's going on? What panel am I in? What am I feeling? Why? And then so we can talk ourselves through it. So I think it's important, if you're a spouse or a parent of someone with borderline, they need the program too, because then they'll better be able to understand, how to deal with it. And that's one of the things I suffered with the last 3 days is nobody's been there. No one's been to what I've been to. They don't know. I can't talk to my mom. I can't talk to my dad.
Right.
I'm making my sister crazy.
Yeah.
I have nobody.
Yeah.
It's just, hard.
So
I do have somebody. There's some nice guy that I can't name, but he talks to me and helps me when I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I know
Nothing about you, Walter.
I know we're running out of time because Walt's giving me the minute signal here.
Yeah, we've got a minute left.
I just wanted to say that I really admire you. I have great admiration for you. I can't even imagine what it must be like to live in that level of pain, and then to feel that there's a sense of hope and a pathway. And I'm honored that I was able to create a pathway for you. And there
Dr.
is
Judy, you're giving me parole. I'm getting paroled out of my emotional prison.
well,
I love you.
I love you too. That was my goal. My goal was to help people get out of psychological prison. And also, I want to send you something called the prevention plan. Okay, remind me, text me, email me something. I'll find it. And also, for those of you listening, I want to send you. Just give me your email. Or call me or give me an email.
Or you can just write us at info at Dr. Judy WTF.
Yeah.
Info at drjudywtf.com.
Yeah.
And we get it to you pretty quick.
Yeah, it's free. I just have to find it, download it to you.
Yeah.
And it's a hurt prevention plan that goes right into what happens if you're triggered. And it starts with feeling the pain and then processing it through. So I'll send it out to whoever wants it. I'll send you a copy, Sheila.
I'm just going to say one last thing.
Yeah.
Traditional therapy teaches us CBT, DBT, blah, blah, blah. That's treatment for what happens when you're in the problem, but they aren't dismantling. Your program dismantles.
That's the
teaches
goal.
you how to deal with it.
Dismantle.
Yep.
So I know we'll talk again. Thank you so very much for
Thank
sharing
you.
this with us. Okay. All right.
Thanks, Sheila.
Okay.
God bless
God
you.
bless.
And we
Bye-bye.
appreciate you a lot.
Bye-bye.
And thanks for calling. We'll talk again.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. This is the most hardworking person I have ever met. Seriously.
Yeah, she's quite a student
Yeah,
of,
she really
of the
is.
system and where she's at.
Yeah.
And she's willing to do the work. She just has to have the tools.
Yeah, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge the team, the Psychological Healing Center team, you included, Walt. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and your notes. And Walt does a lot of research, and I love you, Walt. You're really an asset to what I do. I know sometimes people have little issues with you and so on, but, I'm sure we're issue people. What can I say? And all in all, I really appreciate you as part of the team here.
Well, thank you. I work very hard to stay up with you, to keep up with you.
I think
it's a lot of work.
you're almost PhD level now.
Well, thank you.
And,
Thank you, doctor.
Sure. And we have an amazing staff. So understand that if you can't afford to see me, I have people who work anywhere from $80 a session on up. I used to try to see everybody, but it's just impossible. We're not a free clinic, unfortunately. Maybe someday we will be funded. So in the meantime, we have to honor the people who work for us, and so the minimum fee is $80 a session. You guys need 10 sessions for the mind map therapy if that's what you so choose to do. And so I believe there's somebody on the team for everyone.
Absolutely.
And also ask a lot of questions. My interns, psych assistants are there to give consultations and answer your questions. And I hope we could help a lot of people because this human disconnect thing is now epidemic and there's a lot of chaos and breakdowns.
Yeah, it's
so
huge.
It's huge.
And we're now going to go to our segment of Shrinking That Tune. And the title of the song, this one, is just a little more global, but along the same lines. It's called Everybody Hurts by REM. So I'm going to read the lyrics, and then Dr. Judy's going to interpret the song. And here we go. When your day is long and the night is yours alone, when you're sure you've had enough of this life, well, hang on.
So I'll interpret it in terms of the borderline aspects. So again, day is long. It represents that it's hard to be emotionally, to have a long emotional bandwidth and keep up with the day. And then, of course, you're feeling alone. And then it feels like you can't go on anymore because there's that hollowness inside. And trying to hang on is very tough.
You got to tie a knot in that rope. Don't let yourself go, 'cause everybody cries and everybody hurts sometimes. Sometimes everything is wrong. Now it's time to sing along. When your day is night alone, hold on. If you feel like letting go, hold on. If you think you've had too much of this life, well, hang on.
Right. Keep hanging on, but more than hanging on, which just makes people tired, right? Process those feelings. Don't just hang on. Express these feelings so that your nights don't feel like forever and you don't feel like you're alone and just hanging on alone. And so this is what happens is when we are in this dynamic, everything feels like we're just putting everything on pause and clutching on, holding on for a better moment.
Everybody hurts. Take comfort in your friends. Everybody hurts. Don't throw your hand. Oh, no. Don't throw your hand if you feel like you're alone. No, no, no. You are not alone.
And that's the point. Connect. If you're feeling disconnected, don't be alone. Connect.
Because we are wired to connect. Don't throw your hand if you feel you're alone. No, 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 you're not alone. If you're not on your own in this life, the days and the nights are long. When you think you've had too much of this life, to hang on. Well, everybody hurts sometimes. Everybody cries. Everybody hurts sometimes. And everybody hurts sometimes.
And hopefully when we cry and when we hurt, we have somebody that compassionately can listen to us and attune to us and mirror us so we don't feel so alone.
And so hold on, hold on, hold on, and everybody hurts.
So I will say express, express, express. Don't hold on, don't implode, don't explode.
But call the show and unload.
Thank you, Walt.
Oh,
I
you're
know you love that line.
And you can also contact the Psychological Healing Center and do the same. You don't have to implode or explode, but you can unload because there's a plethora of folks. You can hear our voice anywhere in the world. And Dr. Judy and her staff can definitely help you do that. We are Dr. Judy WTF for What the Freud, heard every Thursday here at ubnradio.com, here at the Gower Gulch Studios in the heart of Hollywood at 8 p.m. Pacific. And remember, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have free-for-all calls. So if you have a topic you just are dying to talk to Dr. Judy about, well, that's your chance. Although you can call anytime, actually, if you want to. And you can find us on Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and, of course, YouTube. And you can write us with suggestions, as this one did, for a theme of a song or a show at info at drjudywtf.com.
And don't forget, first Thursday every month, all those people who called and asked for a specific, call in and you're on and ask away.
So now we're going to close out with our song. And until next time, and we are going to continue with this next week. Got a lot of information I want to impart. We're going to bring in some Greek gods even. It's kind of very interesting. Yeah. So stay tuned, and thank you for tuning in. Until next time, God bless everybody.